Calcium feels safe, familiar, trusted, almost untouchable. For decades, it's been sold as insurance for your bones, something you take so nothing collapses later. And by the time people reach their 60s, calcium isn't questioned anymore. It becomes routine. One pill, every day, year after year, with the quiet confidence that you're doing the responsible thing. But here's what almost no one explains. Calcium does not automatically protect aging bones. And in the body you have now, taking it the wrong way doesn't just do nothing. It can slowly end up in places it was never meant to go. Not dramatically, not overnight, quietly. I've seen people follow the rules perfectly, consistent, disciplined, trusting the label and the advice. And months later, they're confused. Bone scans barely change. Joints feel stiffer. Digestion feels off. Sometimes something deeper starts to shift. The issue was never commitment. It was relying on assumptions that no longer apply after 60. This video isn't about scaring you away from calcium. It's about precision. Because once you understand how calcium is absorbed, regulated, and directed in an older body, everything changes. You stop stacking supplements blindly. You stop guessing. And you start protecting strength in ways that actually work long-term. Today, we're breaking down 8 calcium supplement mistakes that most people make without realizing it. Each one seems harmless on its own. Together, they explain why calcium so often fails to deliver the protection people expect. And it all starts with one belief that quietly shapes every mistake that follows. Let's start with the first one. Mistake number 1. Believing more calcium means stronger bones. The idea sounds logical. If bones are made of calcium, then taking more should make them stronger. That belief has been repeated for so long that most people never stop to question it. But bones don't work like a storage container. They don't absorb calcium endlessly just because you supply more. Bone tissue is constantly being broken down and rebuilt, and that process is tightly regulated. Once your body has what it needs, adding more doesn't automatically translate into added strength. After 60, this becomes even more important. The body is less flexible with minerals. Absorption slows, regulation tightens, and when calcium intake exceeds what the system can handle, the excess doesn't simply disappear. It stays in circulation longer, waiting for direction. Calcium without direction is not protection. It's just material looking for somewhere to land. And in an older body, that's where problems quietly begin. This is where many people get misled. They increase their dose, believing they're being proactive, when in reality, they're placing extra pressure on a system that now demands balance, not force. Strong bones aren't built by overwhelming the body. They're built by supporting the biological process that puts calcium where it actually belongs. The real shift happens here. Bone health isn't about how much calcium you take. It's about whether your body can use it properly. Once that clicks, the entire conversation around supplementation changes. And when people finally let go of the more is better mindset, they're ready to move on to the next mistake that's been quietly shaping their calcium habits for years. Mistake number 2. Taking high-dose calcium for years without checking blood levels. Many people settle into a routine and never revisit it. The same calcium dose, taken daily, year after year, with the assumption that consistency alone equals safety. Blood levels are rarely checked because calcium feels basic, not like something that needs monitoring. But calcium in the body is not passive. Blood calcium is tightly regulated for a reason. When intake stays high over long periods, the body has to work harder to keep levels within range. And when balance begins to drift, it rarely announces itself loudly. This is why issues can develop without being noticed. There's often no pain, no clear symptom, no moment where something feels obviously wrong. calcium can slowly end up in places it was never meant to support, while the bones themselves see little improvement. People are left confused, wondering how they followed the routine so faithfully and still didn't get the outcome they expected. What many don't realize is that long-term supplementation changes the equation. The longer high doses are taken without feedback from blood work, the more the body is forced to adapt in ways that aren't always helpful. Guessing replaces awareness. Intention replaces information. Here's the key distinction. Stable blood levels do not always mean calcium is being used correctly. Monitoring adds context, and context is what protects the body from slow, invisible stress. Once people understand that calcium numbers can look normal while calcium function is not, another critical gap in their approach starts to come into focus. Mistake number 3. Taking calcium while low in vitamin D. Taking calcium feels productive. You swallow the pill, check the box, and assume your bones are being supported. But inside the body, none of that matters if calcium never makes it past the front door. This is where vitamin D quietly decides the outcome. Vitamin D is not a bonus nutrient, it's the gatekeeper. Without enough of it, calcium absorption drops sharply. The mineral may move through your digestive system, but very little of it ever reaches bone tissue. From the outside, it looks like you're doing everything right. Inside, the system is still coming up short. This problem becomes far more common as the body changes over time. Skin produces less vitamin D from sunlight. Time outdoors often shrinks. Conversion in the liver and kidneys slows. Many adults are technically taking calcium while functionally unable to use it. That disconnect explains why bone density can stay flat despite years of consistent supplementation. This is also where frustration builds. People assume supplements don't work, or that their body is failing them. In reality, the system is incomplete. Calcium cannot work alone, and vitamin D is not something you can afford to guess about at this stage. Here's the shift most people miss. Absorption determines outcome. If calcium isn't absorbed, effort never turns into results, no matter how consistent you are. And even when calcium finally gets absorbed, the body still has to answer one critical question next. Where should that calcium actually go? Mistake number 4. Skipping vitamin K2 alongside calcium. Even when calcium is absorbed, the process is still incomplete. Absorption only tells you that calcium entered the body. It says nothing about where that calcium will be used. And that missing piece is where long-term issues often begin. Calcium does not direct itself. Once it enters the bloodstream, it depends on biological signals to determine its destination. Vitamin K2 supports those signals. It helps the body separate calcium meant for structure from calcium that should not remain in circulation. Without that guidance, calcium doesn't pause and wait. It continues moving through the system, interacting with tissues that were never designed to store it. Bones may still be asking for support, while calcium is quietly diverted elsewhere, delivering far less benefit than expected. This is why results can feel inconsistent. Someone may take calcium faithfully, even pair it with vitamin D, and still see little change in bone strength. The problem isn't effort or discipline, it's missing direction. Without K2, calcium becomes a resource without instructions. What makes this mistake especially deceptive is how rarely it's explained. Many people are told calcium is the foundation, vitamin D is the helper, and that's where the conversation ends. But bone health is not built on isolated nutrients. It's built on coordination, on signaling, on timing. When coordination is missing, the body doesn't protest loudly. It adapts quietly, and quiet adaptations are easy to overlook until years pass and expectations are still unmet. The real takeaway here isn't about adding more supplements. It's about understanding how structure is created in the body. Calcium supplies the material, but placement determines the outcome. Which brings us to the next mistake, where timing alone can undo even the best intentions. Mistake number 5. Choosing the wrong form of calcium for your digestion. Calcium looks simple on a label. One mineral, one promise. But inside the body, calcium is only as useful as the digestive environment it enters. Different forms of calcium place very different demands on digestion, and many people never realize their body has quietly stopped meeting those demands. Some forms depend heavily on stomach acid to break down and become absorbable. That works well when digestion is strong and consistent. The issue is that digestion doesn't fail all at once. It shifts gradually. Meals still feel normal. Appetite still shows up. Nothing feels obviously wrong. Yet the chemical conditions calcium relies on are no longer reliable. This creates a frustrating pattern. Effort stays high, but results slowly fade. People take the same supplement, at the same dose, with the same discipline, and assume the problem must be somewhere else. Bones feel unresponsive. Progress feels stalled. The supplement gets blamed, or worse, the body does. What's actually happening is a mismatch. The form of calcium being used no longer matches how digestion functions day to day. Absorption becomes inconsistent. Some days enough gets through. Other days, very little does. From the outside, the routine looks solid. Inside, it's uneven. This mistake is deceptive because it rarely causes clear symptoms. The body doesn't send a warning saying the form is no longer appropriate. It adapts instead. Adaptation maintains balance, but it doesn't build strength. And maintenance can feel like progress until you realize nothing is improving. The real takeaway here isn't about memorizing supplement types, it's about compatibility. Nutrients don't work in isolation. They work within environments. When the environment changes, the approach has to change with it. And once the right form is chosen, another factor becomes impossible to ignore: how calcium is taken and what it's taken alongside. Mistake number 6, taking calcium at the same time as medications. Calcium doesn't operate in isolation. Once it enters the digestive tract, it interacts. It competes for transport, for absorption, and for priority. That's why timing matters, especially when calcium is taken alongside prescription medications. Many commonly prescribed drugs depend on specific absorption conditions. Some need an empty stomach. Others need distance from minerals. Some rely on narrow timing windows to work properly. Calcium can disrupt those conditions by binding to certain medications or altering how quickly they move through the gut. When that happens, effectiveness is reduced on both sides. The issue is rarely obvious. Pills are taken. Instructions are followed. The routine feels correct. Yet the medication may not reach its intended effect, and the calcium may not be absorbed efficiently either. Over time, results start to feel inconsistent, even when adherence remains high. This mistake usually comes from convenience, not neglect. Combining pills feels efficient. Fewer steps, less friction. But the body doesn't respond to convenience. It responds to separation. Calcium, in particular, functions best when it isn't competing for attention. What makes this problem easy to overlook is the lack of immediate feedback. There's no clear signal that interference is happening. Instead, effectiveness slowly thins. Medications feel less reliable. Supplements feel less meaningful. The routine continues, while the return quietly diminishes. The real takeaway here is respect for interaction. Calcium actively changes its surroundings. Giving medications and calcium their own space protects their function and preserves the results people expect. And once timing between pills is addressed, another factor becomes impossible to ignore. The body doesn't process nutrients the same way at every hour of the day. Mistake number 7, taking calcium late at night. Nighttime feels harmless. The day is over. The routine slows down. Many people take calcium before bed out of convenience or because they assume the body will use it while they sleep. That idea sounds reasonable, but it misunderstands what nighttime is actually for. Sleep is not a neutral window. At night, the body shifts priorities. Digestion slows. Movement through the gut decreases. Blood flow patterns change. Repair, regulation, and recovery take precedence. Calcium, however, requires active processing. It needs digestive engagement, transport, and mineral balance, things the body is intentionally dialing down. When calcium is taken late, it enters an environment that isn't optimized to handle it. Absorption becomes less efficient. The body has to juggle two competing tasks, winding down and processing minerals. For some people, that shows up as lighter sleep or restlessness. For many others, there's no clear sensation at all, just reduced payoff from the supplement. This is what makes the mistake easy to miss. The pill goes down smoothly. Sleep still happens. Nothing feels obviously wrong, yet calcium is handled less effectively, and nighttime recovery doesn't get the clean conditions it prefers. Over time, that mismatch adds up as inefficiency rather than immediate discomfort. This isn't about rigid rules or fear. It's about alignment. Supplements work best when they match the body's natural rhythm. Calcium is better handled during periods of active digestion, not during the hours meant for repair and regulation. Taken earlier in the day, calcium fits the system more cleanly. Taken late, it asks the body to multitask when it shouldn't. The result isn't damage in one night, but diminished return over many. And once timing across the day is addressed, there's one final habit left, often overlooked, that quietly determines whether calcium helps or simply passes through without leaving much behind. Mistake number 8. Taking calcium without drinking enough water. Calcium doesn't move through the body on its own. It travels in fluid. When that fluid is limited, calcium becomes more concentrated, harder to move, and more difficult for the body to manage efficiently. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of supplementation because hydration feels unrelated to bone health. It isn't. Without enough water, calcium moves more slowly through the digestive tract. Absorption becomes inconsistent. The mineral lingers where it shouldn't and reaches its target less reliably. Over time, that concentration forces the body to work harder to regulate and filter something that was meant to move smoothly. This mistake is easy to dismiss because it feels ordinary. Many people drink some water and assume that's sufficient. Thirst isn't always a clear signal. Neither is dry mouth. The body adapts to mild dehydration quietly, even as internal processes lose efficiency. Taken day after day in a low-fluid environment, calcium becomes heavier work. Digestion feels sluggish. Elimination slows. Supplements start to feel irritating or uncomfortable, not because calcium is harmful, but because the conditions around it are wrong. Hydration shapes how calcium behaves. Adequate fluid keeps concentration balanced, supports filtration, and allows minerals to move with purpose instead of resistance. When water intake is steady, calcium is handled predictably. When it isn't, the body compensates in subtle ways that are easy to miss. The takeaway isn't about drinking excessive amounts of water. It's about consistency. Supplements don't operate in isolation. They respond to the environment you give them every day. Look at all 8 mistakes together, and a pattern becomes clear. Calcium doesn't fail because it's useless. It fails because it's misunderstood. And once that misunderstanding is corrected, bone health stops feeling complicated and starts feeling manageable. When you look at all 8 mistakes together, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. None of them come from bad intentions. People take calcium because they care about staying strong, independent, and mobile. The problem isn't effort. It's the way calcium has been misunderstood for years. Calcium was never designed to work in isolation or on autopilot. It depends on timing, balance, and the environment you give it. As the body changes, it becomes more selective about what it can handle and where minerals are allowed to go. That's not a flaw. It's how the system protects itself. Once you understand this, calcium stops being something you simply take every day. It becomes something you manage with awareness. You stop chasing higher doses. You stop stacking supplements blindly. You start paying attention to how your body actually responds, not just what the label promises. This shift alone changes everything. It replaces guesswork with understanding. It turns frustration into clarity. And it helps you support your bones without quietly working against the rest of your health. If one of these mistakes made you pause and rethink your routine, share it in the comments. Chances are, someone else watching is dealing with the same issue and doesn't realize it yet. And if you want clear, honest conversations about nutrition and health, without hype, without fear, and without selling, subscribe to the channel. That's what we do here. We focus on understanding the body, respecting how it changes, and making smarter choices that actually last.